Let's welcome former White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon. Steve, thanks for joining us. We definitely want to get to talk about President Xi and this latest news. But where are you? You're in Sunland Park, New Mexico, at a portion of the wall, GoFundMe portion of the wall.
Yeah, what you're seeing is right up the Cristo Rey Mountain. We're right where all the activity's been with this. The issue with asylum and illegal immigration are right at the corner of El Paso, Texas, Mexico, and New Mexico. We're right at mile marker 1, where the Rio Grande stops being the border all the way from the Gulf of Mexico to here. It's the border of the United States. From here all the way to the Pacific, it's all deserts and mountains. And so a private group, the Army Corps of Engineers, this is private land, said a wall couldn't be built here, and so we raised money. We Build the Wall is a private foundation. We take donors' money, and we built really a magnificent, all the way up this mountain, a complete security system, fiber optics, state-of-the-art wall, cameras, all of it, to show that this actually can be done, to augment what the president's doing. The president and the Army Corps of Engineers are building 800 miles across the deserts and the mountains. We're dealing with those areas that the Army Corps said is too tough to build.
It's a little strange that some of the city officials do you take these threats seriously? That I don't know, the permits weren't in order. I mean, why wouldn't it's private funding of something that that it seems like it would be in the city's best interest to have. Why is the city against this being built, or they seem to be pushing back on it and looking at?
I don't think the citizens are. We've stopped. This is a cartel. What this is about stopping the cartels. The cartels have made this human trafficking and drug trafficking, a high cash, high margin business. What's destroyed Juarez, Mexico, and what's destroyed northern Mexico is the cartels. This kind of paramilitary, operation that just does trafficking all the time. This wall has stopped incursions 100% since it's been up. We built this entire operation, almost 2/3 of a mile straight up a mountain, over Memorial Day weekend. We graded beforehand. The owner of this private property says he all the permits. He repped and warned us he had the permits. We built this wall with private money and American engineering, all American products. And I got to tell you, the people down here, when they come, they said this is stopped. They had 17 paths up in these mountains where the cartels would bring in sex trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking. That's all been shut down 100%.
Kind of been a sea change in recent days about is it a crisis, is it not a crisis? You think this is a lasting change in the way it's viewed by maybe even in a bipartisan way at this point?
I think if people don't think it's a crisis, they should come down here. This is clearly, look, it's a crisis of biblical proportions of the people coming up from Central America. But what you have to do, you have to have a wall. It's not a total solution, but what it does is forces people to go through ports of entry. And at ports of entry, then the government can kind of sort it out about who's eligible and who's not eligible. What you can't have is just this open incursions, this open borders. A wall's not a total solution, but the wall's the beginning of a solution. And particularly, and this is what's changed, is to break the back of these cartels. People don't realize, I don't think, how the cartels have criminalized northern Mexico. They took a great border town in Juarez and have basically made it one of the most dangerous places on earth. I think it's the 37th murder capital in the world now on a per capita basis. It was not like that for decades and decades. If you ask the citizens of El Paso and here in Sunland Park, New Mexico, they will tell you these cartels are so dangerous. And this is right on our border. I mean, this is more dangerous than Afghanistan. And so this is what this wall's here to do. We've seen it's shut down incursions 100% since it got built over Memorial Day weekend.
Well, you have an interest here, but also you're one of the real hawks on China and how to handle this. And there's been a couple of news stories out. Number one is that maybe we get a 6-month delay in new tariffs to maybe that's already been decided. But then we also hear that President Xi has a list of things that he'd like to be included in any type of trade deal. And you've probably seen the news reports. It would have to be, lifting the ban on Huawei. I can't imagine you like either one of these, either the one that President Trump maybe is willing to do or the one that President Xi is asking for. You wouldn't agree to either, would you?
Well, look, in the headlines when they say it's a trade war, as I've said for a long time, I think other people agree with this, is that this is not a trade war. It's an economic war. And now you see the CCP, not the Chinese people, but this radical cadre of the Chinese Communist Party has been running against the West for 15 or 20 years. And it's broken down into sectors. You've got a financial war part of it, a technology war, you've got the trade and tariff part of it. And to me, what President Xi laid out today, with everything that President Trump tried to do, with initiating the phone call, with actually saying that he would delay, look like for 6 months, the second wave of tariffs that were going to happen in early July on the other $300 billion, that he was prepared to at least sit down after these guys worked on a deal for 6 to 9 months and then redlined the entire thing on these verticals, which are so important to kind of restructure this and restructure the Chinese economy so it now can fit into the world economy. I think the gap between the bid and the ask is getting big, and it was big and getting bigger.
Steve,
I don't see how President Trump can agree to any of these.
That's what I wanted to ask you, which is you told the South China Morning Post that Huawei is a major national security threat, not just to the U.S., but to the rest of the world. We are going to shut it down. Given the view that I think you have, which is that it is a national security risk, when the president says that it's also possible that Huawei would be part of a trade deal, how does that happen? Is there a way to thread that needle practically?
I think it's very tough, Ross. Look, my belief is Huawei, and I think this is backed up by a lot of people, Huawei is part of the PLA. It is part of the People's Liberation Army. It is basically their 5G rollout, and that basically gives them, with One Belt, One Road, Made in China 2025, and Huawei's 5G rollout, game, set, match. They control advanced manufacturing, become the center of the manufacturing universe in the 21st century. We all become tributary states. I don't know how you do it. I think Huawei is essentially a dirty bomb inside industrial democracies. And I think we're finally waking people up to that. Here's the thing that I think Xi shows weakness. They know that if we stop these component part sales to Huawei, it could be over for them, just like in ZTE. This is the industrial democracies, and particularly the United States. We hold all the cards, okay? This, in the FT the other day, they said they were so disappointed in American leadership now. They had such a great relationship for 20 years. That's because American leadership gave them all the capital, allowed them to take all the technology, whether it's forced technology transfers, allowed them to steal it, and we basically allowed ourselves to be deindustrialized. You look at Elizabeth Warren, what her package is. We allowed a manufacturing base in the United States to be shipped to China. You've seen the global supply chain starting to come back. This Huawei thing, Ross, I don't know how you square it. I think it's a national security issue for all of the industrial democracies. It basically makes information the new plutonium, and I just don't see how you square that. I think this is going to get to be a very big deal, and I think that's why Xi's putting it out there as a precondition for everything else to go on. Look, he essentially retraded us on the deal that we had when they redlined it, took all the provisions out on the verticals. Today, he basically retraded us also, say, hey, they can't agree to any more purchases to close the trade barrier, that they can't, that all tariffs have to come off, right, which have been a sine qua non of Trump's policies from the beginning, say this is an enforcement provision. And now Huawei, I think the bid and the ask here are getting wider.
But this may be Xi's opening salvo trying to get to a position. What we've heard from people who know some things behind the scenes is that maybe he would relinquish the idea of saying, yes, we will go ahead and buy more things from you, that's a movable point. Huawei is a bigger sticking point. The Wall Street Journal is also reporting this morning that Xi plans to bring up the idea that he could be a good partner in negotiating with both North Korea and Iran. So how would you kind of measure that in terms of how big of a bargaining chip that is? Because obviously Huawei is a concern from a security perspective, but North Korea and Iran also front and center right now, too.
You know, David Faber and Jim Cramer talk all the time about how we're a tributary state now. There's not enough they buy from us to even close this trade barrier significantly. That's because we're a tributary state. We don't really sell any advanced manufacturing to them anymore. So this is a huge, huge sticking point. That's why enforcing the overall deal to move the supply chain back is everything.
Steve, I'm sorry.
Not just
I'm sorry. I just mean, would you be willing to trade a Huawei security concern for North Korea and Iran?
No, absolutely not. And here's the reason. Their incursions into Iran, and Iran is geostrategic. They've got a port in Pakistan. Iran's getting to be their partner. We're standing up to Iran, but China is the senior partner in this. Right. North Korea and Iran are the junior partners. If you show that you're prepared to bend on Huawei, because Huawei gets you into the heart of the industrial democracies. It basically allows you to drive 5G. You can't. I don't think you can waver. I don't think you can waver.
But then take us inside the room, if you will, or the mind even of the president or others in the administration. When the president says publicly that he's willing to put Huawei on the table, at least he's indicated that, what is he thinking?
Well, I think, listen, remember, President Trump is a master negotiator. Nobody would have ever envisioned 2 years ago, when the Trump administration really took over from Obama, how the Clinton, Bush, and Obama administration had been misled by the Chinese. They had agreed to all kinds of deals on cyber intrusion, on the South China Sea, on a whole raft of things. Joe Biden, who should answer these questions tonight, and basically China did what they wanted to do. Now you see Trump's got them to the table and has highlighted where their weaknesses are. So President Trump's a master negotiator. Look, he's 100 times better than I would even think of being. But inside the room, you see where you had the Secretary of Treasury said, hey, we're 90% of the way there on a deal. I don't know what deal he's working on, right? It's certainly not this deal, because we're not 90% of the way there. I think there's huge gaps, and I think you have very pragmatic people like Mike Pompeo, you have John Bolton, you also have Peter Navarro and Bob Lighthizer. You have some people I would consider real hawks that I think look at the totality of the picture, both the geostrategic parts of like Iran and in North Korea and the South China Sea, and also the parts dealing with these fundamental verticals that they have to restructure on state-owned industries, intellectual property reform, forced technology transfers, and that. So I think the facts back up where the hawks are to say we can't waver, and we've got these guys, and now we've got to bring this home.
So, Steve, do you foresee a trade war continuing right into the November election of 2020? Is President Trump willing to be in the middle of this, or will there be some type of, if you will, watered down, temporary sort of an interim agreement with China before the election to say, okay, we've got this, and you know, it's not hurting the economy, and let's have the election, and then maybe return to it? How do you see it playing out?
I see it playing out. This is such an important meeting. I think if they set a process, and I think that's the most you can expect coming out of Osaka, if they set a process and we delay the second round of tariffs, if they set a process to get back in and start negotiating, you know, I've said before, it'll take you a year to put this together. You may have something into next year, but if we stick to our guns about what's absolutely needed and what's needed to help the Chinese people, right? And to help the Chinese people, and also to back things like Hong Kong, I think this could take a while. I don't think this is going to be easy, knowing the Chinese press, they're talking all the time about how this is going to be generational now. So I think we're engaged in this. I don't see any short-term let up on this. There could be optics, and there could be deals that talk about optics and buying more soybeans or things like this. But I think when you talk about the fundamentals, with the Lighthizer deal memo of 175 or 200 pages outlined, that deal, which is really the deal that the West has to have, right, and really to take on things like Huawei and ZTE and others, I think that's going to take a while. I don't think that's going to be done by 2020.
What ticket do you think the president should fear the most, or would you fear the most from the Democrats? And what ticket could win, do you think, if there is one?
I think it's too early to tell, but I got to tell you, last night I didn't see a lot of stage presence up there to take on. You know, if you're going to take on Donald Trump, you know, Hillary Clinton, for as much as the Democrats, you know, trash her today, she was a very tough candidate. I didn't see a lot of stage presence up there last night, and particularly Elizabeth Warren, for all her talk about economic patriotism and all that kind of, you know, talking about the things we've talked about a lot about populism, for her to say last night that China is not the biggest existential threat we have, but climate change, I think, once again shows that she's prepared to pander to people. So I didn't see it last night. I didn't see anybody. If the American people saw anybody at that stage last night that can go into the room in Osaka and have meetings with Modi and have meetings with Abe, have meetings with Xi and Putin and the rest, and really represent America's interests like Trump's doing, and start to bring good things back to the United States and to the industrial democracies, I didn't see it on that stage last night.
Okay. Steve Bannon from the border down in Mexico. We appreciate it.